Good afternoon to you all, our dear viewers of Civic Space TV. Welcome back to this week's episode of the Inter-University Debates. This week, we have quite unique setting of our panelists and our conversation. But nonetheless, it is the Women's Month. And that being said, on Saturday, we saw President Yoweri Museveni reside over International Women's Day. And of course, this year's theme centered around acceleration of growth. And tonight, our topic centers around the question that can the youth help close the inequality, the gender equality gap in Uganda and accelerate action. So joining me to discuss this very interesting conversation is a panel of distinguished ladies and gentlemen who will join us shortly to help us unpack the conversation. So I'll just quickly have a round of introductions. We are joined by Oprah Nkalubo. Oprah Nkalubo is a student of law at Makerere University, but also we are joined by Sandra Asoniwa, still a student of law at Makerere University. But let me give Oprah and Sandra a chance to say hello and maybe introduce themselves further, and then we can get into the nitty-gritties of the conversation.
Good afternoon, viewers. My name is Sandra Asoniwa. I am currently pursuing a bachelor's degree in law at Makerere University. I am enrolled in my final year, and I am excited to be part of this conversation and to share my ideas with you. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much, Sandra. We're very happy to have you here. And just allow me, set context to this conversation. Say today we're talking about asking the question whether the youth can close the gender equality gap in Uganda and accelerate action. So just for context, this year, the Uganda Bureau of Statistics conducted a population census, and our country's current population is estimated to stand at around 48.66 million Ugandans, and 51% of that population are female, and 49% is said to be male. So, and over the years, we have seen that 71% reside in rural areas, while 29% reside in urban areas. So overall, Uganda is one of the youngest nations in the world, with about 74% of its country's population under the age of 30. So 22% are people aged 31 to 59 years old, and only 4% are aged 60 years and above. The government of Uganda considers gender equality and women's empowerment as critical for the attainment of accelerated socioeconomic transformation. It has also made gains in its socioeconomic development, maintained peace and stability for over 3 decades, and it's on course to become an upper middle income country by 2040. So that said, Uganda's economy has doubled more than twice from Uganda shilling 64 trillion in the financial year 2010-2011 to Uganda shillings 162 trillion and financial year 2021-2022 in nominal terms. So the country has made some advancements towards the attainment of gender parity and narrowed gender gaps in the economic participation, opportunity, educational attainment, health, and survival and political empowerment spheres. So Uganda's female labor force participation rates historically have been higher than those in other countries in sub-Saharan Africa, of course, which tends to have the higher rates than other developing countries. So women comprise 40% of all business owners, making Uganda one of the 7 countries in the world to achieve gender parity in the rate of entrepreneurial activity. So women also fare relatively well in financial inclusion. In 2019, 2020, 49% of Ugandan women had access to some form of financial service. That is compared to 57% of Ugandan men. That said, Uganda has well ratified and is part of a couple of international instruments and commitments. Uganda is part of the Gender Equality and Women Empowerment. The 1995 Constitution guarantees equality of women. We are seeing a Vision 2040 prioritizing gender equality, among other instruments and legal frameworks that prioritize women. But that said, there are a couple of factors that are still trying to limit with all these achievements that we have in place that pose a question of gender equality. And that is why we're here today, to discuss what the young people can do to help narrow that gap, because it is said that we are we comprise 70% of the population, and yet the gender inequality gap is seemingly also still increasing. So Sandra, just as way of kickstarting the conversation, I would like to start with the idea of unentrenched. I would like to start with the idea of unentrenched social norms and practices. Something that, in my opinion, I think greatly contributes to the gender equality. Let me give you an idea of social norms and practices that we are seeing in today's world. The first one is in relation to the stereotypes and male bias. So my question to you is, how has the stereotype and male bias mainly contributed to the gender inequality gap in this country? Sandra?
Hello, may I please ask the question again?
Yeah, the question is, how has the gender stereotyping and male bias that we have in our societies today entrenched gender inequalities? Of course, which will lead to a follow-up question on how can we, the young people, help subdue the stereotypes?
Okay, so I understand the gender stereotype in three ways. There is a stage of life when you are born, and then there is a stage in life when you are a youth, and then there is a stage in life when you're an adult. So when we are born, we are raised into what our parents believe, and that is the patriarchal society, where they raise you and they tell you father is the head of the family, you're supposed to do this as a woman, dress like this as a woman, love this color as a woman, a boy is supposed to love this. So that is how we are born. That is how we are raised. At that point, mostly in your life, you don't have a choice of, I don't think I should do this as a woman. Like, you basically go with what they are telling you to do. So then when you reach the age of youth, that is when you have a chance to revolutionize. This is when you have a chance to do independent thinking. So that is where all the change occurs. Then when you go old, mostly your mind is focused on finances and there is less of an idea of, am I treating women fairly? Are women being treated fairly? Like, by the time you grow up, whatever you learned when you are youth is what you're going to carry on at that point.
Thank you. Let me just quickly, from that point of trying to lay foundation on stereotype and male bias, bring in Oprah. Oprah, I see you're back with us. Maybe as you unmute and turn on your camera, I'd just like you to come on board and reinforce the point to do with gender stereotyping and male bias. Something that I think has led to the entrenchment of social norms and practices that has greatly contributed to the gender inequality gap. So Oprah, one, how has the stereotyping and male bias mainly contributed to the gender inequality and male bias? But two, how can we as young people in our spaces and in our spheres greatly contribute to narrowing that gap and changing the social norms that relates to stereotyping and male bias to help narrow the gap of gender equality? Oprah?
Thank you so much. I hope I'm very clear. In regards to gender stereotypes, I think that this is a narrative that has been there for a very long time. In regards to how women have been brought up, the types of families that they've seen their mothers growing, where they are excluded to kitchen environments, cooking and things like that. And even when they go into school, you find that women are not able to have the same privileges like the boy child would, the way that teachers treat them and all these things. So it's sort of a culture and a system that young people have grown up in. But you see, when we arise and grow, we then realize that some of these things were barbaric, they were backward, they were not, they don't bring out the purpose of we as women or whichever marginalized group it is. So we want to change these things. But as young people, because there is a history of this marginalization, it's difficult for a person to stand up. It will not just be a mere pep talk and then a person can, arise and be empowered and look out for all these different opportunities. It's not quite that easy. That's why I think that as young people, it's important that for those who are self-aware, for those who and know what it means. For those who know the importance of gender equality, it's important for them to rise up and cause awareness, cause a sense of sensitization among the young people. We need to have figures that we can look up to for mentorship, people we can look up to help build us in our different areas of life. Otherwise, if we do not have such figures, it's going to be very, very difficult to change the norms, because this is something that we have grown up with. You see, it's not every day that a person, even when they know they are being oppressed, they may not necessarily speak out until they have a form of encouragement or esteem from somebody else. So I think it is important that we have people coming on board who have learned these things, who have been empowered to create groups, to create platforms where they can mentor young people, where they can reach out to young people. But two is the issue of education. I believe education is so important in breaking gender stereotypes, because when you go to school, the way your mind is opened up is not like that of a person who has never been in any formal education whatsoever. The system that is in formal education, the fact that you have to compete academically with the other gender, you have to participate in different activities, it gives you a sense of esteem, it gives you a sense of confidence. You're able to learn new things, you're able to learn that you can ably compete and even live within the means of other individuals, right? So I think that is one of the best things that we have in regards to that I think that's one of the best things we can have in regards to promoting gender equality. So I think that is one way we as youth can stand up. It's important for us to have groups that create awareness, but also foster education, because it sets us apart. Thank you.
Hello, Oprah, we have lost you there. Are you all right? So the point that Oprah was trying.
I was finished.
Yes.
I was just concluding. I said that it's important that if we as young people are to bring about gender equality, we have to form groups that raise awareness, mentorship, but also foster formal education.
All right. You said mentorship, raise awareness, and then foster formal education. But let me just bring this argument up close. We have a population, approximately 71% living in rural areas. And living in rural areas means we have a society that is greatly still reliant on social norms and cultural practices that impede us in breaking those barriers. Now, that said, let me give you an example. The practice of bride price, which is one that is good for our cultures, but oftentimes and not, the idea that comes with it, some people think that it being an appreciation should go beyond that, because ideally bride price is a form of appreciation to the parents of the lady. But the rationale that some people have is that once you pay bride price, you own the woman and you own the lady. And now that has seen, first of all, a rise in issues to do with, well, one, early child marriages, two, the entrenchment of the idea of course, men are a dominant species, but not downplaying the solutions of formal education, awareness, among others. Majority of the young people who know these issues, such as yourself and Sandra, are in urban areas. So what practical solution are we looking at giving that young person in the rural areas, who are the majority, who are affected by this, to help us close that gender inequality gap? Oprah.
Thank you. I think I go back to what I said earlier. If you look, when we put rural and urban together, it becomes quite a difficult conversation, because the difficulties that are faced by people in urban areas are quite, they're not as hard as those of people in rural areas. So that means that if a person is empowered in the urban area, they have to be able to reach out to really close and bridge that gap. And it goes back to the point of awareness, because I think that this is something that you cannot change in a day. because you mentioned bride price. Of course, a person who is educated, probably you've been around the city, you obviously have the idea that this is a way of thanking the parents that raised up this girl. But that is quite different from what is actually happening in rural areas. Because a person thinks that because they have maybe given in one cow, one goat, they can control this young girl. That's where we have issues of domestic violence raising. That's where we have so much discrimination among women happening. But if we and people who can ably empower young girls in rural areas don't really exist in the rural areas. Most of these people are in urban areas. So it's important to have an outreach. It's important for us to broaden the awareness programs so that we have sets of people who can go into these communities and offer mentorship to these young girls and track their progress and say, okay, we came here in January, we have taught you A, B, C, and D. Let's track your progress. Let's see how well you're doing in regards to putting yourself out there, being a different sort of individual, different sort of person. And then they track your progress, maybe 6 months. How far has this gone? So unless we have such programs, really, the truth is that the gap keeps widening. The urban-rural gap keeps widening. So I think it's important for us in these urban areas to really extend and help out people in these rural communities.
Thank you very much. It's very true that us in urban areas need to extend and help people in rural communities. Sandra, something of interest. Things to do when Oprah was demystifying the arguments to do with the norms that oscillate around the idea of bride price. I made mention of issue to do with child marriages, early child marriages. And I just wanted to engage on that point because it looks like much as the law that we said we have plowed, we have we have domesticated international instruments, we have the law that provides for the legal age to marry. We are still seeing persistence in the rise of young girls getting married at a very young age, which is something that, of course, widens the gap. And yet here we're looking at us young people trying to narrow down the gap. So how can we young people narrow down that gap of early child marriages that we're seeing still persistent and it's still going on in our communities?
Okay, thank you. So in my opinion, early child marriages and bride price are two things that have to be fought in different ways. So the things that the government needs to fight with an scientist, they need to put sanctions. Things like early child marriages are not ideological things. This is a practice that is dangerous, and it's not something that is going to change when people keep sensitive, like when people keep talking to each other and telling each other, oh, this is what, this is something that needs like a more stringent method. There should be like legislation, there should be actual sanctions. Now, the whole idea of culture transformation moves with ideology. What people believe in is what in turn becomes the culture that people take on. So when initially we can see something like women wearing trousers, initially women were not allowed to wear trousers. So this idea comes, it always starts with the modern setting, what they call that. So then women will wear trousers, then it keeps moving to the villages. It's not accepted from the beginning, but gradually people keep accepting it. That is how cultures come up. That is how traditions develop. They develop with social change. So for things like bride price, this is not something you're going to tell people, oh, if you give in bride price, you're going to be arrested, you're killing them from their culture, and people need to go with their culture. So what do? You bring ideas of transformation to a point where people give in appreciation instead of bride price as an exchange for a woman, because literally right now you're giving in bride price as buying a woman. So you need to get to a point where it is a form of appreciation. So culture needs to transform through ideology. And how does this happen? This is through, as I described earlier, the youth stage is when you get to engage with your mind and decide what you want to do, what you want to believe in. You're exposed to a lot of things. I personally think university education is the most liberating one because it's where you get to use your mind the most. It's where you're told to think, give your opinion about things. When you study in secondary education, this is less relatable to your life. They're just telling you things. They're telling you things off a curriculum and not out of your society. So at this point where we can think for ourselves, the point when they should teach us about gender equality, the point when they should teach us what we are going to go home and tell our parents. Our parents may not take it as gospel truth, but if our peers take it in and there is a generation that takes it in slowly by slowly, it will start becoming something that is believed in, start being something that is practiced in. And eventually, if something becomes widely practiced, um, it eventually becomes like law. If it reaches a point where they're like, this idea of you're both a woman is not right, it's going to become like law. People will be ashamed to do it because everyone is not doing it. So that is how cultures evolve. Sensitization is a great tool, but yes, it works, but to a less extent. So this is something that takes time, but the thing is, every time, with every generation that focuses on it is doing something that the other generation picks up from. So our generation will not be able to achieve it, but that means the next generation is picking up from where we have stopped to achieve it better. Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. You bring up very key issues on how the issue of early child marriages just dates back, and of course, it's something that has entrenched much. But yes, it's a process, and we as young people need to join hands to help combat that. Thank you very much, Ginyera George, for joining us. Just as you join, maybe as you unmute and turn on your camera, you can quickly introduce yourself, but I'd like you to come and help us unpack a point relating to, of course, as we're discussing entrenched social norms to help us, as we're trying to narrow down the gap of gender, gender equality in this country. The issue of the unbalanced power relations between women and men, girls and boys in public and private spheres at household, community, and national levels. Of course, we have some statistics coming in from Uganda Electoral Commission, which indicates that you see in like only one in females, there's only one female, only one is female. The statistic says that only one is female city mayor out of 10 city mayors, and only one out of 31 municipalities has a female mayor. Now, that is just a few statistics that are at place that provides for the unbalanced power relations between women and men. And as young people, at the moment, we have the elections for the youth coming up real soon as we gear towards 2026. So that is a conversation I'd like us to have at this point. How do we then narrow the gap and balance the issue of gender equality and having more women, more girls in positions of influence and positions of power? George. All right, maybe George is looking for a stable internet connection and
Yes, Onen.
yes.
Thank you very much. I had a brief technical challenge, but I'm back online. My name is Ginyera Orochi, and I'm among the panelists for today. I don't know, Onen, should I join in video?
Yes, if you can turn on your video, well and good. But if you can't, you can go ahead and make your submissions.
Okay, Onen, thank you very much. I think this is the first Civic special that I'm attending outdoors. If I'm to turn on my video, you'll see the trees in my background. I wouldn't want to be so merciless to our viewers. But I thank all the panelists that have made all their contributions thus far. Like I've said, my name is Ginyera Orochi. I'm a student at Makerere University. And Onen, thank you very much for the question. I think I'll begin from where you've stopped because I think we are reading from the same report. And the EC also notes that out of the 146 districts in Uganda, only 5 have female LC5 chairpersons. Equally, also only 1 out of the 31 municipalities in Uganda has a female city mayor. So that is a statistic that is quite worrying, like you've mentioned. And I think even to give context to the conversation, today in Makerere, there are guild elections. And even out of the 14 candidates, none of them is female. And that is Makerere. So there's a lot to do in as regards to the power structures that we have in our society. And I think owing to some of the conversations that we had yesterday with my colleague Oprah Nkalubo, discussing as to why women in these leadership positions have not yet been welcomed. And I think it goes back to the systematic patriarchy that we have in our society today, that to this day and age, the composition of parliament, if the affirmative positions of parliaments that of women MPs, one per district, were not there, then I don't think we'd have a sizable number of women in parliament. Because even when you look at parliament today, very many of the women that are there, the 33% that compose parliament, I think the biggest percentage are those of the affirmative action. When you go to the directly elected members of parliament, we see very few women. I don't even think they make the number of 20 parliament. So I think one of the causes is what Asoniwa was trying to relate to about the patriarchy that you have that is existing in society. And as young people, these are things that we need to look at, because the gender movement has been something that I've been very fond of. I've interacted with Sandra, I've interacted with Oprah, and these are things that must be changed because they go to the root of society. Then I think one of the ways in which we can, in a sense, reduce in some of these things that you see is still what Oprah mentioned yesterday about creating awareness, because these are challenges that cannot be wiped away by an appointment by appointment of Nabanja, by appointment of the Honorable Vice President Jessica Lupo, but these are things that go to the root cause. Because some people tend to make the argument, but you see, what we have today, we have a female prime minister, we have a female speaker, and that is a sample space that they would want to mention. But they forget.
George, just allow me interject there. The thing is, the positions that these ladies are occupying are positions of power. The statistics of this year indicate, as we celebrated International Women's Day, we have parliament is comprised of 33% being women, and cabinet has an approximate percentage of 45%. That means possibly it could translate to, one, we have more women close to, it's approximately half, like we have more women in positions of influence in the cabinet, but also we have a fair representation of women in parliament. But then maybe to help reinforce the argument, you could, something I would like to understand. We have these percentages of women in positions of power, but we are not feeling their impact. But nonetheless, Honorable Nabanja is the prime minister of this country, and you know the power that a prime minister holds. So what is the difference? What could be the issue? Because people make all kinds of arguments and say, yes, she holds a position and we're not feeling the impact. Why?
I think, Onen, the question of impact is something else that we should answer. Because even then, I must mention that even still, her male counterparts are not answering. The deeper conversation to have today is what you have mentioned, those statistics that you're mentioning. That cabinet is comprised of 45% of females and parliament is comprised of 33%. But what I'm trying to say is that what we have, the statistics that you're mentioning, is that what is comprised in that 31% are those affirmative action, 33% are those affirmative action positions. In cabinet, it's the same issue that the president wakes up today. And maybe it's the policy of the president to, in a sense, empower women. So the president wakes up and appoints women. But when you go on into the deeper question of if today, Onen, who is from Gulu, I don't know how many females of the very many constituencies in Gulu, from the city to the district structures, how many of them can be directly, if they were told they were subjected to the same election with a male counterpart, how many of them will be directly welcomed by society as is today? And that is the conversation that we are trying to have. The competence or what these people are outlaying, I think, is a question that should not be gender biased in any sense. Because if you have to point out that Nabanja has not performed, then I would ask you, what did Amama do? Is there anything tangible that they did, or Hakana Rugunda, or all the people that have been in her line, apart from competence? So Onen, and I think, and colleagues, the deeper question today that I would want us to answer is in regards to this systematic patriarchy that exists in society. Because when you mention those statistics and what I've mentioned, I think there's still a deeper issue that we must discuss, apart from the competence of these individuals that are appointed.
All right. Thank you. Thank you very much, George. Maybe just as you wind up, I just want you now to help us. I just want us to look at the private sector, particularly in the economic sphere. We have seen statistics that Uganda ranks amongst the top seven that has seen a couple of ladies who are business owners, but also women who have greatly contributed to the economic development of this country. But at the same time, after COVID-19, we have seen a rising gender inequality in economic empowerment. Just let me give you statistics here. We have seen a rising inequalities in employment at 48%. Of course, females at 39% and males at 58%. An increasing and in increasing women's entrepreneurship, gender inequality in economic empowerment and economic outcomes remains a concern. We saw that in 2020, UNDP, Uganda's report, shows that the impacts of COVID-19 reveal that women, youth, elderly, and people with disabilities and chronic conditions were falling or at risk of extreme poverty. As young people, we are trying here to narrow the gap. Very many of our young people are unemployed. And as I started this conversation, I said, the country is comprised of approximately 71% young people. And half of that population, of which are young people, majority of whom are female. Now, that being the case, that means we have very many young ladies who are unemployed, very many young ladies who possibly who are affected with disabilities, very many young ladies who are sidelined from possibly engaging economically in this country. Now, as young people, how can we narrow that gap to help at least have our colleagues and our fellows uplifted and also join the money economy?
Yes, thank you very much, Onen. I think even owing to the same report that we were sharing, what the UNDP produced, it mentioned that the majority of those 71% people thrive within the rural areas of Uganda. There are very few that stay within the urban areas. And I think the question of economics is something that is very, very deeply rooted and needs discussion. And back, I will keep on narrowing my discussion back to these systematic challenges that we have in society today. Because Onen, when you go back home to the village, when I go back home to Madiokolo, very few females actually are going to be owning tangible property, which is something that is very key, possibly in access to finance, and as regards to collateral and whatnot. Because our society still believes that women can't inherit property, women can't own cars, women can't own all these things. And when you talk of those statistics, and even all these venture funds that are coming in, loans and all the government that is doing, these are things that accrue when you have something to offer in as regards to security. So the question of economics is actually very, 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 very key, because it's part of the reasons why some of these communities have been liberated. Secondly, I'll go back to economics and mention still, for my sisters in the legal field, they are very open to the fact that right now at law school, actually females pay me more, but when you look at the representation at the bar, there are very few females that make it to the levels of senior counsel. And I think that is something that is subject to debate. Even in the recently concluded Kabaziruka case that did away with civilians being ruled in military courts, you didn't see, apart from Martha Karua, who came in the case of Besigye, you didn't see any female at the bar representing. So they still exist very many structural challenges that hinder women's participation in all these fields, be it social, be it economic, be it political, that need to be rectified before we answer this.
So George, how can we narrow that gap? Because that's where the conversation is.
Yeah, that's what I was getting to.
Yeah.
How then do we narrow the gap as young people? Because like you mentioned, still youth elections are coming up, and I think I'm happy to mention that many females have taken up the space, and I think Onen is also open to that fact. I think firstly is to have this conversation more often, but these conversations must not be concentrated to us, the elites in Kampala. These conversations must go deep to a person in Agago, to a person in Madiokolo, to make sure that his daughter can be at the same level with the son. Because even in my home, for my parents who studied, a lot of trust is put in me as the first boy child. Yet my sister, who is like 10 years older than me, is not given the responsibility that I'm given, which is something that exists even in my home where my father attended school, even my mother. It gets to the extent that when we are at a function and maybe something needs to be said, my father is introducing people. They look out for the boy, not to the female. So these discussions must be held more often to help liberate, not in a sense liberate, but to create awareness about these structural issues and how best they can be rectified. Secondly, is I've seen how this institutional politics can help a lot because I've supported very many female candidates in the guild house, in the executive. So we must encourage our peers, most of the female peers, because people learn from them actually. And then I know can also help and know that very many of the people that are going to be participating in the youth elections have been in this institutional politics. So when people come here to campus, when they come to these institutions, I think there's need to create room because it starts from here that people keep on coming and coming and coming. And I'm very glad to note that on our space today, we have the Honorable Nkalubo Oprah, we have Asoniwa Sandra, who I share a class with. And I know because of their exposure, because of some of the things they've interacted with, I won't be surprised if tomorrow Asoniwa Sandra and Nkalubo are practicing law at the Supreme Court.
Right, thank you. Definitely, I hope that Oprah and Sandra make it to the Supreme Court, and we shall refer to them as Senior Counsel Oprah and Senior Counsel Sandra. Nonetheless, let me get to you, Oprah. We have greatly discussed the issue of entrenched social norms and practices, discussed issues relating to the unbalanced power relations, brought in the perspective of gender stereotype and male bias. We also went ahead and talked about the persistence of early child marriage, and went further to talk about, of course, a point that was brought up by Sandra to do with domestic care tasks. Of course, consider that women are the ones supposed to do all that. And now I just want us to, take the conversation a little bit further on the issue of something maybe that is rarely talked about, but I think one that is crucial for this conversation, which is in relation to of course, an area to do with climate change. And women are oftentimes the most vulnerable when it comes to adaptation in instances of disaster. And when we started this conversation, we said majority of the population live in rural areas. And that means we have been experiencing extreme heats. We have seen disasters happening before in Bududa, among others. And majority of the people affected are women. And of course, as you set context to that conversation, of understanding that unequal capacities in adaptation to disasters for ladies, women and girls is different as to that to men, because you put in various factors. Set for us the pace, and then maybe bring to us, tell us what, as youth, what can we do to help narrow that gap, to help women, to help girls, to help ladies narrow the gap and be in position to adapt in instances of disaster.
All right, thank you so much, Drake, for that question. Just to set a little bit of context, when we look at women who suffer in regards to disasters that happen because of climate change, we have to backtrack a little bit, because who are these types of women? These are single mothers. These are women who have to fend for their families. And I actually believe that the reason as to why we have many women in the economic sphere of the country is because most of them are single mothers. Men have left their duties of being caretakers of homes, of taking care of these women, and now women have resorted into places where they have to fend for their children. A mother has over 6 children, and she's the one who has to be in the garden. She's the one who has to take the produce to the market, get the money, pay fees, do all these things, take care of the household items and all these things. And this is on her shoulder because her partner probably left her. You'll realize that Uganda is one of the countries with the highest rates of single mothers. So even when it comes to issues of climate change, you will find that women are the ones doing the garden work. Even when it comes to the patriarchal system, it is women who are supposedly supposed to be in the gardens farming. And today, they're even the ones taking care of households. So they are very pertinent in the economy, but even the social life of Uganda today. And what hurts is that government has not been able to put in place policies or measures that can accommodate these women when such natural disasters happen. Because now, look at an example where you have a mother who has, let's say, 4, 6 children. Her plantation has been destroyed. Her home has been destroyed. She has these children to take care of. You may find even some have died. She is nursing emotional wounds. She is nursing financial wounds, economic challenges, and really people who are supposed to step up, especially in times of crisis, is government. Look at this heat wave we've been having. Because mothers, especially in rural areas, are the ones that take care of the families, gardens are dry. They do not have what to eat. Children do not have any sort of provision, any sort of school fees, because there is really nothing to sell. But how has government, as a key stakeholder in issues to deal with disaster, especially for marginalized women, what are they doing in their capacity? You realize that nothing is being talked about. The conversation is drifting to things that are not even that are not matters of life and death. You see, we have had a heat wave all the way from December. Here we are in March and we are almost receiving dry rains, right? But then what has government done to take care of these mothers? When you look at such situations, they are not there. And let's even leave mothers aside. I know they are quite a group that suffers a lot. But even the men who deal in such areas where, because climate change doesn't just affect women, though it affects women more, it affects all of us. It affects all of us. But what has government done? We've not heard of any sort of irrigation schemes in certain areas, or issues of food provision, or drought-resistant crops. These are things that government is supposed to do. Unfortunately, as young people who may not even hold positions in top leadership that can decide on what policy goes, what money is allocated where, the most we can do is speak about it. The most we can do is write something on Twitter and let it move. The most we can do is come on Civic space and say something needs to be done, but we don't really have the power. The power lies with the people in government. The power lies with stakeholders who should take interest in such matters and create solutions, because the solutions exist, but there needs to be an implementation, because it's not just women. I know women suffer more given their motherly duties especially, but so do the men. This climate issue is a national problem, and it is sad that we have not seen government take charge. We see it come through when disaster has happened. If you remember what happened in Kitezi, government had seen this coming, but it failed to provide structures to relocate these people. It's because you just cannot chase away people. You have to form structures to relocate these people, but that did not happen. We saw people die. We saw mothers suffer, and after the disaster had occurred, that's when people woke up. People started bringing aid. That's when government sort of cared. So should our government really start caring when calamity occurs? If you look at different scenarios, you see that there's really a need for government to restructure its priorities to affect these marginalized groups of people. I remember still in regards to climate change, when the government was supposedly protecting their environment in Lubiji, and they were chasing away people. These are people who have been on the land for a long time. Some of them had even land titles. Some of them had really made a life there, and government did not do any sort of compensation towards these people. And they claim that, we are protecting the environment, but then at what expense? I believe so many people who were evicted at that time are now suffering. They do not have food. Their livelihood, their standard of living is very low. And these are issues, I think, that even cross-cut gender. These are issues that cross-cut gender. So we should be able to have government as a pertinent stakeholder. And it's sad that the most we can do as young people is advocate, create some sort of awareness, write about it, speak about it. But government needs to stand up. Government needs to take its position. It needs to hear the voices of the people and create policies that cater towards the needs of the people, especially the women. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Oprah. It's very true that when it comes to issues of disaster, women are more vulnerable and greatly affected. But of course, government has tried its best. But as young people as well, I see we have come up with initiatives to help support people who are affected with extreme calamities and disasters. Sandra, I just would like to engage you, or still on the same point, to do with, of course, climate is an area that our generation is greatly interested in, and one that we are quite vocal about. And from what Oprah has submitted, she has given us context to how climate greatly affects us and what government has done. But I'd just like to engage you to help us come up with, give us an idea of how young people are helping, first of all, narrow that gap in regards to women who are affected by disasters, and what initiatives that are in place to see that we help support and narrow that gap of gender inequality that is existent on that front. Sandra.
Thank you very much. So basically, my understanding of climate change and women. Okay, maybe let me first address this because I feel like someone out there may be like, why are they talking about women? It's climate change and it's affecting everyone. Like, why specifically women? So why women? It's because of the nature of the impact affecting more women than men. Because basically, women are carrying out a bigger role than the men are carrying out in a family structure, like agriculture, getting the food and all that. So what we the youth can do, the initiatives that exist that are youth-led initiatives. So the grassroots is how do we control climate change? Because as an individual here, you may not be able to go and reach out to this person that is being affected in Kasese or in Bali, like it is physically out of reach. You do not have the resources to go there. So we look at how do we control climate change, that is the grassroots. I recently interacted with a group, it's called Gaio Uganda. It is a youth-led initiative that looks at adapting to effects of climate change and preventing climate change. They look at things like tree planting, sensitization. So this is something that everyone can do at the basic state they are. One greatest tool that we have as youth is social media. Social media is something that right now is accessed by everyone. It's not restricted to urban areas. Almost everyone has access to a mobile phone and has access to TikTok, Facebook, WhatsApp, like all that. Yes. So our greatest tool is to dominate the social media. Our greatest tool is information on social media. Like, what can we use it to do? We can teach people what they can do to control climate change. And then where it's out of our hands because we are not equipped to finance adaptation to climate change effects, but maybe we can force the hand of the person that is equipped to finance climate change. We have seen a lot of youth that have come up to fight. Majorly, it has been the political fight. We have seen the march to parliament. We have seen the naked protest, and all these were youth-led. So what if in our protest, what if we go into these key areas that are affecting you? What if we go into climate change? What if we talk about, the thing about the government is they'll ignore something until someone says something about it. A person that has been displaced is usually a disadvantaged person to speak against something. They're trying to get the bare minimum that they can get from the government. So they feel like they may annoy it if they keep reactive, like, oh, this facility is too bad, oh, you've not catered for me as a woman individually, oh, where are the surgeries, how do these girls get back to school on time? Because a boy can leave a refugee camp or a displacement center to go to school, but can a girl do that? Because she needs more and more. So what I feel like we should do is to be a voice to the voiceless. Yes. So they have suffered, we have recognized that, so now we need to speak it out. Like put the government on pressure to address these things that they are often ignoring and misallocating funds for, because this is something that they're supposed to cater for their international standard students. Yes. So if at all government is not adapting, is not using the funds to cater for this, then that becomes our duty to speak it out. Yes, so basically I think that is how the youth can help bridge the gender equality gap realistically.
All right, thank you. Thank you very much. That is very succinct and straight to the point. As we reach towards the end of our conversation, but of course, as we are talking about this and still celebrating the month of our dear mothers, our dear sisters, ladies, girls, women. George, I'd just like to bring you on board. You're someone, you yourself, you're interested in running for office in this coming youth elections. And what I would love to see different is, of course, more ladies participate in the youth structures and youth elections. But of course, as that happens, of course, there are a couple of things that come in place. But just want to bring you on to help come up or share with us your solutions in regards to helping us narrow the gender inequality gap in regards to the unbalanced power relations, because we need more women in offices of power and influence, and we need more ladies in the private sphere.
So my opinion about women and being in politics is basically why we have a small number is because women at a point where they only engage in what is handed to them. Like society is supposed to accept us in a certain field before we can get there. So how we got to increase number of women in politics is they forced these positions. I'm sorry, which is the word forced. I hope it's not problematic. But they say women, instead of saying MP, they say woman MP and the man MP. Yes. So right now, most cases when women come up into political fields, people are like, oh no, we can't let a woman rule us and all that. So how to cure this is to force them into the system instead of saying we need like cater for a feminine space, like put it there so people can go for it. It's not going to be taken over by men. They cannot complain because it clearly says female. That way we are going to increase the numbers up to a point when we won't need to, because the platform will be fair. Like there will be a competition between a man and a woman, and whoever wins, it will feel like yes, it was fair. But right now it feels like people are biased. People are like, how can we let a woman realize? So to kill the stereotype, we need to just force the system so people can just forcefully adapt to it. Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Sandra. That's very true. We need to continuously, of course, we need to continuously push the message. Oprah, what do you think we can do differently as we narrow the gap of gender equality?
Thank you so much. I believe as young people, there's a lot that we can achieve if we work together, but also if we get our voices heard to the right audience, because it's not just about speaking against something, like raising awareness against something, and yet you're not really reaching the person who is able to change the narrative. So I believe it's important for us to be more outspoken about this issue, but then let us make sure to engage. Let's find ways of engaging with our government, with our different leaders, so that we can actually see practical, sustainable solutions to these challenges. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Oprah, for that message. George?
Yes,
George.
Onen. Yes.
Yes, my question was particularly on the issue of unbalanced power relations coming up in these youth elections that are yet to happen for the year 2026. What can we as young people do to narrow that gap and see that more ladies with influence, more ladies with the capacity come and we narrow that gap, and of course have more ladies come into the positions and influence policy and move this country forward. So what
Okay,
can we
thank
young
you.
people do?
Yes, thank you very much, Onen. And I think I'd wanted to start on the note that, as I'd mentioned, very many, at least I know I had quite a number of my female colleagues that are really trying to vie in for these positions because of the deliberate steps that they've been undertaking throughout their institutional level politics and something of that sort, really. And I think us as young people, because this is a very pressing issue and a very big concern, to make sure that us as a generation that is within the brackets of 18 to 30 should make sure that the gender priorities level surely in our politics can be leveled up. Like I mentioned in my first submission, there's a lot to do around awareness. And then because people may know that this challenge is there, but they've not appreciated the magnitude of this challenge, really. Because like I mentioned earlier today, that there are very many female students of law in our institutions. But when you look at the bar, at the level of senior counsel, at the level of Supreme Court justice or High Court judge, the level tends now to reduce. So there are very many challenges that are encountered by the females on the other side of the product, and more so now in politics, because participating in institutional politics has showed me that there are very many challenges that the females go through, from sexual harassment. You're going to ask for votes, but the gentleman is asking for sex and all these kind of favors. So there are very many challenges that need to be rectified.
All right. Thank you, George. Yes.
Maybe lastly, and then I was just catching a breath, is that lastly, there's need for us equally to have these institutional frameworks, policies that safeguard females from all these sort of games. Like we have in Makerere, the sexual harassment policy. I don't know what exists nationally, because females, we must appreciate, go through a lot of drama and a lot of challenges just because they are female in these elections, taken advantage of in whatever way they could be taken advantage of. So there is need to have safeguards. There's need to have a very conducive environment for all of us to participate equally. Thank you.
Thank you. Maybe before you go off, your concluding remarks as we wind up the show. George, your concluding remarks?
Yes, and then I think in by way of conclusion, first of all, I would like to thank the most able submissions from Nkalubo, from Asoniwa, and you, Onen, for organizing and moderating this show. It's been one of a kind. I must say that I've attended it while walking steadily in Makerere because today is election day. And I'm glad that surely I've gotten time within this Women's Month, to talk about some of these things. And most importantly, because we're heading in for the 2026 electoral cycle, I think there was no better time than now to speak about this. Then lastly is to encourage all of us in our smallest of capacities to champion this cause, to champion the gender cause, because I have a sister, I have a mother, I have a friend who is a female. So there's need for all of us to coexist in a society that is very harmonious, in a society where all of us can access some of these opportunities equally without constraints that are biased, stereotypical in nature, and all these other challenges. So thank you, Oprah. Thank you, Asoniwa. Thank you, Onen. And hopefully, when we get some more time, we shall reflect on some of the things that have been said and how best to actually make them feasible and practicable in our everyday lives. Thank you.
Thank you very much, George. Asoniwa, concluding remarks, please.
Much, Onen, for organizing the space, and to my fellow panelists, George and Oprah. That was a very insightful discussion. I love the ideas, and I am grateful that I was part of the space. I hope the ideas go somewhere and change our mind or get implemented somewhere. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you for the contribution. Oprah?
About that. Thank you so much for having us on the show, Drake. Thank you so much, Civic Space TV. Thank you so much, Uganda University Debates. It's always a pleasure to come around. It's always a pleasure that we have platforms where our voices can be heard and they are able to reach different people. I thank the different panelists that we've been with today. Asoniwa, George, thank you guys so much for such a great conversation. And we keep the work going. We keep pushing for a better Uganda and for a gender equal system. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Oprah. Thank you very much, Sandra, and thank you very much, George, for the wonderful submissions made in tonight's conversation. It's been very delightful and insightful for me because I've learned a lot from you all. So from the team, Civic Space TV, Center for Constitutional Governance for making this possible, Asante Sana. And to you, our dear esteemed viewers, for always watching and following up on catching up the Inter-University show. Thank you very much. See you next week. Same time, same place, but in the studio. Bye-bye.